Right there! Suspect neutralized!
First of all, thank you very much to Gibbs-O-Matic for allowing me to use his footage of the spectacular 410 jury reload in the intro that you just saw. If you'd like to check him out, he's in the description. But isn't that thing awesome? I mean, in my opinion, the default reload of the 410 jury is already amazing as it is. Like, the guy's got a bunch of shells stuck in between his fingers, and he rapidly, yet meticulously, sets them in the revolver one by one, and it looks incredible. But after watching the jury reload Easter egg, I noticed something that was a little bit peculiar that was going on. Like, if you watch it in slow motion, something a little off happens. Just look at this for a second. Pay close attention. In case you didn't catch it, if you watch closely, he flicks in 1, 2, 3, 4 shells and tosses away the 5th one, yet the capacity of the revolver is clearly 5 rounds. So I decided to do a little bit more digging, and if you look at the 5 chambers in the loadout menu, one of them is clearly empty. Yeah, so there's definitely a round absent from the right chamber, yet you can still fire 5 shells. I feel like this is the part where I pretend there's some kind of Easter egg within an Easter egg, like some kind of ghost shell exists, or like Illuminati confirmed, but I won't. Let's move on. Now, I'm not sure if the 410 jury should technically be placed in the shotgun category because, first of all, it's a sidearm. Second of all, it's only available to the mechanic class, not the enforcer. And third of all, it's extremely pocket-sized tiny, but if you'd like to get your hands on it, unlocking it is actually fairly simple. All you need to do is complete the Mechanic 1 assignment, where you have to get 10 SMG kills and repair 5 vehicles, followed by the Mechanic 2 assignment, which requires you to get 25 SMG kills and destroy 10 vehicles with sabotage. And I know that might sound a little bit daunting, the whole sabotage thing and the whole SMG kill thing, but if you play maybe 3 to 4 rounds of Hotwire and you diligently dedicate yourself to putting car bombs on vehicles, it will not take you very long. I thought it was going to take me a while. It took me like, I don't know, 6 minutes. It was actually a very, very expeditious process, which did not take me very long. But I must warn you before you immediately close the video and rush to unlock it, the 410 is actually not that spectacular. It's not as if it's terrible, but it's by no means special, and here's why. Number 1, it will rarely one-shot enemies, so its role as a close-range, insta-killing machine is very limited. Number 2, the range is not that far. Even at 10 to 15 feet, you're probably going to require 3 to 4 shots to put somebody down, even if they are oblivious to your presence and you're shooting them in the back, so that's not that appealing. Number 3, the very, very low capacity. It's not like an M9 or a MAC-10 where you can slaughter half of the enemy team before reloading, and that's an actual thing if you guys have not used those weapons. So overall, I'm pretty neutral on the 410. It's by no means terrible, but it's also not my go-to sidearm for any situation. Moving on to shotgun primaries, I'd like to start by quickly going over attachments, which in Hardline are actually pretty simple, but please keep in mind that this video isn't really a comprehensive guide. It's more just tips and advice, because the statistics of the shotguns we don't have yet, and additionally, I don't think Visceral is going to settle on the shotguns for quite a while. I think they're going to nerf, and they're going to buff, and they're going to change, and they're going to alter for quite a while before they actually leave them alone, so I won't make a comprehensive guide for another little while here after the game comes out. But in any case, on to the attachments. So first you pick your optic, which I always run irons. I think that running a red dot or an ACOG feels goofy and clunky and doesn't feel right because the range of engagement with shotguns is so extremely short, so I never run one of those. And for the accessory, you can either select the flashlight, tac light, or laser light, depending on your playstyle. The flashlight can blind your enemies, but it stays on all of the time unless you turn it off manually. The tac light is pretty similar, but the light only turns on when you aim down sights, and the laser light makes your hipfire a little bit more accurate if you're one of those run and gun, Usain Bolt with a shotgun, I never want to stop sprinting inside the bank type people, but personally, I usually go with the tac light, so I only alert enemies to my presence when I'm aimed down sight and ready to paint them onto the wall. And You know, in the accessory category, you're able to run slugs if you want, but I've used them pretty extensively and they are not all that great. They're pretty terrible. They're not consistent one-shot kills at close range. They are absolutely outperformed by assault rifles at medium range, and overall, they're not really what you want out of a shotgun at close quarters domination type gameplay. So I would recommend steering clear of the slugs because they are extremely underwhelming. Extremely underwhelming. Now for the muzzle, you can either skip it all together, go with a modified choke or full choke. The full choke gives you significantly tighter shot spread but punishes you for unaimed fire. The modified gives you slightly tighter spread and of course a moderate disadvantage in terms of unaimed fire. And the standard barrel gives you no improved accuracy spread, but it also doesn't punish you for unaimed fire. So it's like completely neutral. And basically, if you aim down sight before you shoot most of the time, go full choke. If you are never, ever going to stop sprinting in the game and you really want to hip fire everybody on the map, I would go with standard barrel. And if you're somewhere in between, I would go modified. And also too, even with all these different tips that I can give you and say, oh, this is a general rule, I think that you just need to test out the different muzzle attachments before you understand exactly which one works for your specific style for you personally. Now, personally, I run a barrel attachment most of the time. That is going to be full choke or modified choke, but it really depends on which shotgun I'm using at what point in time. One final note that I think is extremely important is to remember why hip firing with shotguns can be so very bad. So when you hip fire with a shotgun, the buckshot is randomly dispersed within a cluster in the circle reticle on your screen, and it does not necessarily all land right in the middle like everybody thinks it should. So although you may have the center of your circle right on a guy's chest, the buckshot could randomly land near the outer ring of the circle, and you won't one-shot the guy because you're barely clipping him. That's the most important thing that you can't forget. Where the buckshot lands within the circle is randomized. It's completely randomized, which is why aiming down sight is so valuable. Now, obviously, you can oftentimes get away with hip firing if the dude is right next to you because you have a ton of buckshot and he's a massive target at point-blank range, but anything beyond right next to you, I would consider aiming down sight just because of how the spread works in the game. The first shotgun that is available to you is everyone's favorite, the 870p Magnum, which can be used by cops or criminals by default, and as of this morning on February 9th has already had its range nerfed. It's obviously a pump action shotgun, it's got a capacity of 7 shells, and overall is a balanced and effective weapon. I think the defining characteristic of the shotgun is that it's the most effective at hip firing, and it's consistently accurate. I think that's the greatest part about it. It's consistent, at least in my experience. Despite the fact that it was nerfed this morning, if you're accurate enough to get most of your spread center mass while on the move, the range is still among the greatest of the shotguns. The buckshot stays pretty tight even when you're rapid firing, and it's a great shotgun to start out with in Hardline if you're just getting used to weapons that insta-kill. I know a lot of you are newer to the game and you're not quite ready to tear up an entire server with an insta-kill weapon like a shotgun. I also personally think that it's the most versatile shotgun. If you want to run around and hip fire without running a muzzle attachment, this thing can work wonders, but at the same time, if you want a little bit more range out of your one-shot killing power, you can strap on a full choke and surprise some enemies at greater distances while aimed down sight. So if you're in doubt about which shotgun to use, you cannot lose with the 870. The other pump shotgun in the game is the 37 Stakeout, which is a police weapon, though it looks like an iconically criminal weapon. I think the main piece of advice that I would give you about this shotty is that I couldn't seem to do well with it consistently, unlike the 870. I've used it for hours upon hours upon hours, and it seems like when it works extremely well. Players consistently go down in one shot, and it feels like a shotgun should, but other times, it just doesn't work out as effectively as it should. My most important tip is to aim down sight as much as possible. There are so many situations where ADSing is the difference between you blasting your enemy in half and him killing you just because of the dispersion of your spread. All too often, I've tried to hip fire some rando across the room only to wing him for like 70 damage and get myself blasted in the process. So definitely, whenever possible, with the Stakeout, aim down sight.
One of these guys is down. That one. He's out. Armed suspect down.
And just to make a quick comparison between the two pump-action shotguns of the game, the 870 and the Stakeout are actually relatively similar in my experience. The 870 has 1 additional shell capacity, obviously with 7, as opposed to the Stakeout's 6. They fire and reload at fairly similar rates, and they have nearly identical spreads, and they also fill obviously similar close-range roles, but personally, I would go with the 870 if you're ever in doubt. The extra round, in addition to the seemingly more consistent hipfire killing power while on the move, is enough to win me over, but even with that being said, I use the Stakeout more often just because I think the sound is more enticing to me and I feel more like a criminal. That's just me personally. On to the double barrel shotgun. I think this one is actually pretty self-explanatory. It does a huge amount of damage super quickly. You can either fire one barrel at a time or both at once with a massive spray of buckshot, but it's obviously terrible for sustained fire. There will rarely ever be a time where you will kill more than 2 players without reloading, unlike many of the other shotguns where you can just absolutely ice 4 to 5 guys before sticking new shells in, and I don't really like it because of this fact. I'm not a huge fan of reloading every 2 seconds, hiding behind corners and lurking in the darkness half of the round, trying to stick new shells into a double barrel, but I think it's a bit of a novelty and not super effective. So although, much like the Stakeout, the Sawn-Off is a bit iconic in its appearance, it's not the common choice of those that want to back rage with ease and pick up massive multi-kills. It's not going to do it for you. So you can also choose a longer barrel version, which you'll see once the game comes out, which will give you a little bit of added range and it behaves a little bit differently. But overall, if you're looking for great performance out of your shotty, there are much better alternatives than the double barrel shotgun, hands down. And finally, we have my personal favorite, which also happened to be nerfed this morning, February 9th, as I was crying my seal tears all over my desk, the SPAS 12. Not only does it remind me of Jurassic Park, but it is also outrageously dangerous in Hardline. And the main reason is that it has great range while also being semi-auto, which means that unlike Battlefield 4, unlike Battlefield 3, it is no longer a pump-action shotgun. That means pew 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 is back on the menu for those of you that hate pumping a new round into the chamber each time that you fire. And because of this fact, the semi-auto SPAS 12 is deadly around multiple enemies, although it did get its damage nerfed today, which I don't think had a massive effect because most of the time that when I'm shooting somebody with a SPAS 12, I can probably reach out and touch him anyways, but I still think it's a perfect fit for close quarters maps such as Bank Job. My biggest piece of advice is to not get carried away with the rate of fire. If you fire the shots too quickly in rapid succession, you're prone to your buckshot becoming way too widely dispersed and you're going to be extremely inaccurate. So in an expeditious fashion, take accurate shots one at a time when putting your enemies down instead of trying to force out all of your shells at once. And beyond the inaccuracy when spamming, sometimes the gun itself can physically block your reticle. Like, just look at that. The SPAS is blocking my view of the sight, so just be careful with your spamming. Just rest assured that if you're a terrible player that can't consistently hit a single shotgun round on enemy targets with pump-action shotguns, the SPAS will be your best friend, because instead of having to rack another round with a pump action, there's already a shell waiting for you to blast away. So overall, when it comes down to it, the SPAS 12 can be summarized with one of my favorite American sayings about weapons, and it goes a little something like this. It's very simple. You don't have to be more accurate, you just have to fire more bullets, because who cares about greater amounts of accuracy when you have greater amounts of currency? God bless America.